What if you step outside of your home and realize there is no street, no sidewalk, no safe ground waiting beneath you? Just a cliff face, a river gorge, a frozen coastline, or an ocean cutting you off from everything else. Around the world, people have built homes in places that seem designed to push them away. Some sit on islands with no neighbors, no roads, and no easy way out. Some are carved into caves, buried beneath desert earth, or built beside volcanoes that have already erased entire towns. You might ask yourself, why? Why build shelter where storms, floods, and landslides are part of daily life? The answers are rarely simple. For faith, for family, for land, work, history, or because leaving would cost more than staying. Today, we're looking at homes that should not exist. And we begin with one that doesn't just sit on a mountain, it clings to it. One look, and the first thing you ask is, how did anyone build that up there? Buffa di Perrero on Monte Cristallo is roughly 2,760 meters above sea level. More than 9,000 feet up, where storms move fast and the air thins. It was never a family home, it was a wartime bivouac used by Italian Alpini soldiers during World War I. Materials were hauled up with ropes, ladders, carts, and cable systems. Today, there is no running water, no electricity, no Wi-Fi, just bunks, brick walls, and a room pressed into stone. To reach it, climbers follow the Via Ferrata Ivano di Bona, a route of cables, rungs, and steel ladders. Rockfall, avalanches, wind, exposure. A shelter built where shelter should not be possible. South of Iceland, one white house sits alone on a green island. No neighbors, no town, no road leading in. Elliđaey is part of the Westman Islands. It covers about 110 acres, and its permanent population is 0. The famous house is not a bunker or secret hideout. It is a hunting lodge, built in 1953 by the Elliđaey Hunting Association. You can see why the myths grew around it. The island once had farming families, but the last residents left by the 1960s. Now the lodge is used seasonally during puffin hunting. Getting there means dealing with rough Atlantic water and no harbor. Boats approach rock, then people climb steep ground with ropes. Inside, there is no running water, no electricity, no medical help. A house surrounded by ocean, weather, and silence. In Ladakh's Lungnak Valley, a monastery grows from a cliff like a stone hive. Phugtal Monastery is built around a natural cave above the Sarup River. Its buildings stack against the rock, clustered around prayer rooms, living quarters, a kitchen, a library, a school, a sacred spring, and the original cave. About 70 monks live here, not for comfort, for distance. For much of its history, supplies came by horse, donkey, and mule. In winter, frozen river routes became part of survival. You do not simply arrive here, you work your way in. Solar power came in 2016, lighting around 80 rooms with microgrids and LED bulbs. But the mountain still decides what lasts. In 2014, a landslide formed a dam on the Sarup River. In 2015, it broke and washed away the school campus. A sacred place beneath a moving landscape. At the bottom of the Grand Canyon, there is a village without cars, no highways, no quick exit. Supai sits inside Havasu Canyon, on the Havasupai Indian Reservation in Arizona. It is about 8 miles from the nearest road after a descent of more than 2,000 feet. You do not drive in. You walk, ride by mule, use pack animals, or fly by helicopter. The Havasupai have lived in the region for over a millennium. Their identity is tied to the canyon and its blue-green water. But isolation has a cost. Mail still moves in and out by mule. Each animal can carry up to 200 pounds, including food and supplies. Flash floods are the real threat. Flooding in 2008 damaged trails, bridges, and campgrounds. More floods followed in 2010. In 2018, helicopters evacuated 200 visitors, a community below the rim, where escape climbs upward. Off County Kerry, stone huts sit above the Atlantic, small, round, exposed. Skellig Michael rises 11.6 kilometers west of the Iveruk Peninsula. Its highest point reaches 218 meters above sea level, with steep twin peaks and a narrow saddle between them. The monks built dry stone beehive huts here between the 6th and 8th centuries. No more than 12 monks and an abbot likely lived there at one time. You imagine the routine: fish, seabird eggs, small gardens, wind. The monastery sits roughly 170 to 180 meters above sea level, reached by old stone steps through open drops and ocean weather. Harsh isolation, Viking raids, and changing church life eventually pushed the monks away. By the 12th or early 13th century, a monastery made for men trying to disappear from the world. Some churches ask for faith before you enter. This one asks for balance. Abuna Yemata is carved into sandstone in Ethiopia's Giralta Mountains, about 2,580 meters above sea level. It is an active Ethiopian Orthodox church, but nobody lives inside it. Priests and worshippers still climb to it. You reach the entrance by using handholds and footholds cut into rock. Then comes a natural stone bridge with a drop of about 250 meters on either side. After that, a narrow wooden footbridge. Tradition says the final portion is done barefoot. No ropes, no harnesses, no easy forgiveness. Inside, the dry mountain air preserves wall and dome paintings, many dated to the 15th century. Outside, the cliff protects the church by making access difficult, a sanctuary guarded by height. In central Myanmar, a monastery sits on top of a volcanic plug. A tower of old fire. Taung Kalat rises 225 meters above the surrounding land near Mount Popa. The complex is active, maintained by monks, nuns, and caretakers. To reach it, devotees climb 777 steps. That staircase is part of the test. The path rises steeply. The drop stays close. Macaque monkeys crowd the route, biting, scratching, grabbing, and harassing people who come too near. The monastery is tied to Nat spirituality and the 37 Nats. Ancient Burmese animist spirits. You climb toward worship, but also toward exposure. Civil unrest in Myanmar adds a modern danger around the site. Safe travel, supplies, and pilgrimage all depend on conditions beyond the monastery walls. storms and lightning press against the summit, a sacred place balanced on a dead volcano. In central Greece, monasteries rise on stone columns, not above the town. Above ordinary life, Meteora sits near Kalambaka, where sandstone and conglomerate cliffs climb more than 400 meters. At one time, 24 monasteries stood here. 6 remain part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site. You can understand the choice. Height created distance. During regional upheaval, the rocks became a natural refuge. Holy Trinity Monastery sits on a precipice more than 400 meters high. Around 570 meters above sea level. Before modern access, reaching it meant crossing the valley and climbing through rock. Supplies were once lifted in baskets with rope ladders, then by winch. Today, tunnels and 130 stone steps still separate the monastery from the world below. Erosion, height, age, and exposure remain, a place where isolation became architecture. Inside a mountain cave in Guizhou, people built a village without roofs. Zhongdong means middle cave. It sits inside Zhong Cave in Ziyun County, about 1,800 meters above sea level. You do not arrive by road. You walk for more than an hour. That distance shapes everything: schooling, food, water, medical care, emergencies. Around 20 Miao families have lived there, with the population close to 100 in 2007. The cave measures about 230 meters long, 115 meters wide, and 50 meters high, large enough to hold homes, animals, smoke, and daily life. Under one ceiling. The houses use woven bamboo walls. They do not need roofs. The cave is the roof. Residents grow corn, raise chickens, pigs, and cows, cook with wood-fired hearths, and collect water from dripping stones. The government built concrete housing below. Villagers refused it. A village inside the earth because outside offered less. Some homes sit near danger. These sit on it. Mount Merapi rises between central Java and Yogyakarta. Its name means mountain of fire, and it earns it. Merapi is Indonesia's most active volcano, erupting regularly since 1548. Thousands live on its flanks. Some villages reach about 1,700 meters above sea level. You might ask, why anyone stays. The ash feeds the soil. Crops grow, livestock matters, family land keeps people tied to the slopes. But the mountain does not bargain. Merapi produces pyroclastic flows, ash clouds, lava, lahars, volcanic earthquakes, and incandescent material. Locals call the pyroclastic flows Wedha's Gembel. The 1930 eruption destroyed 13 villages and killed 1,400 people. A 1994 flow killed 27. In 2010, eruptions killed 353 and forced 350,000 to flee. People return because leaving also threatens survival. A home on land that can turn to fire. Near Naples, millions live beside a pause catastrophe. Mount Vesuvius stands on the Gulf of Naples, about 9 kilometers east of the city. It rises 1,281 meters above sea level, with dense settlement around its slopes. Around 3 million people live close enough to be affected by an eruption. At least 600,000 are in the danger zone. You already know what can go wrong. In AD 79, Vesuvius destroyed Pompeii, Herculaneum, Oplontis, Stabiae, and other settlements. Ash, stones, and volcanic gases blasted up to 33 kilometers into the sky. Around 16,000 people died. The volcano kept erupting. In 1631, lava buried villages and several thousand people died. In 1906, more than 100 died. In 1944, several nearby villages were destroyed. A city living beside a sleeping weapon. Some isolation comes from distance. This one comes from inches. Just Rumenuf Island sits in the Thousand Islands chain of New York on the St. Lawrence River near Canada. It measures about 3,300 square feet, barely bigger than a tennis court. The island holds one house, one tree, shrubs, a small beach, and a couple of benches. The Sizeland family bought it in the 1950s as a holiday getaway. You step outside, and the island is almost over. The house fills nearly everything. No real yard, no buffer, no margin between home and river. The danger is not altitude or fire, it is geometry. One mistake and you are swimming. A private retreat with nowhere to retreat. In southwestern France, a village climbs a cliff in layers. Rocamadour sits above the Alzou River, near the Dordogne Valley. Buildings rise in stages along rock walls that reach about 120 meters high. The place depends on steps. The lower town connects to pilgrimage churches built halfway up the cliff. Above them sit monastic structures and the sanctuary of the Blessed Virgin Mary. You can read the old order in the rock. Workers near the river. Worship above. Defense higher still. A chapel was documented here in 1105. A first miracle was announced in 1148. Pilgrimage pulled people toward the cliff, and the village grew around that pull. But the cliff is not only scenery. In 1427, a huge rock crushed the Notre Dame Chapel, a holy town built under falling stone. At the southern tip of Corsica, a white town hangs over the Mediterranean. Bonifacio faces the Strait of Bonifacio, separated from Sardinia by water. Its old town, the Haute Ville, stands on a citadel promontory above the sea. The cliffs rise about 70 meters. Ocean water has undercut the chalk-white limestone, leaving buildings and fortifications pressed onto the edge. From below, the town appears suspended over rough water. You can see why people stayed. The harbor sits inside a drowned ravine, almost fjord-like, protected by a narrow promontory. The citadel began in the 9th century, tied to Boniface II of Tuscany, who built a fortress and naval base after fighting the Saracens. The same geography that defended the town now threatens it. Sea, wind, limestone, time, a fortress slowly being eaten from below. In northern South Australia, people escape the desert by living beneath it. Coober Pedy sits 846 kilometers northwest of Adelaide on the edge of the Stuart Ranges. It became the opal capital of the world after the first opal was found there in 1915. The heat explains the homes. Summer temperatures often exceed 40 degrees Celsius. Above ground, the desert presses down. Underground, dugouts carved into hillsides stay far more stable. You walk inside, and the threat changes shape. No blazing roof, no direct sun, no heat radiating off metal and stone. But underground living carries its own risks. The area has low rainfall, high water costs, and little topsoil. Temperatures have ranged from 48.3 degrees Celsius to minus 2.0. In 2014, One flood dumped 115 millimeters of rain in 24 hours. By 1999, the area had more than 250,000 mine shaft entrances, many abandoned or dangerous. A town that survives the surface by burrowing below it. In northwestern Iran, people still live inside stone cones. Not beside them, inside them. Kandovan sits in East Azerbaijan, in the foothills of Mount Sahand, near Osku. The village is made of man-made cliff dwellings carved into volcanic rock. Locals call them karans. The rock came from ancient ash flow tuffs, volcanic deposits shaped by erosion over time. Around the village, the formation is more than 100 meters thick. Some of the cone-shaped homes rise 30 to 40 meters. You walk through streets that were not planned like ordinary streets. Water carved grooves between the cones, and people turn those grooves into passageways. Some are connected by bridges. In 2016, Kandovan had 450 residents in 151 households, a village carved from a volcano's old breath. In southern Tunisia, homes sink into the earth. From above, they look like open pits. From inside, they become shelter. Matmata is a small Berber-speaking town where some residents still live in traditional underground troglodyte structures. The design is simple and severe. A large pit is dug into the ground. Around its edges, artificial cave rooms are carved into the walls. Some homes have several pits, linked by trench-like passageways. You can see why people stayed. The earth buffers the desert. It shields residents from heat, wind, and the exposed surface. But the same design can turn against them. In 1969, intense rains lasted 22 days. Water inundated the underground homes and caused many of them to collapse. Authorities built an above-ground settlement after the disaster, but most people rebuilt below, a refuge that can become a trap. In central Turkey, whole towns were carved into soft volcanic stone, houses, churches, monasteries. Cappadocia sits on a high plateau over 1,000 meters above sea level, cut by ancient volcanic peaks. Eruptions from Mount Erciyes, Mount Hasan, and Goluda left thick deposits of soft rock. Wind and water did the rest. They shaped pillars, fairy chimneys, and minaret-like forms. Then, people moved in. You do not just see shelter here. You see geology turned into architecture. Villagers carved homes, churches, and monasteries into the deposits. Underground cities like Kaimakli and Derinkuyu were dug for protection during persecution and Arab raids. They had defense systems, stone doors, and ceiling holes for attackers below. But the rock also carries risk. In 3 villages, a 1975 study found mesothelioma caused half of all deaths. A landscape that shelters, defends, and poisons. In Mali's Dogon country, villages stand along a sandstone wall. The Bandiagara Escarpment rises about 500 meters above the sandy flats below. The cliff system stretches roughly 150 kilometers, with the broader chain extending over 200. The Dogon live here today, but others came before them. The Telem carved caves into the cliffs and buried their dead high above the ground, away from frequent flash floods. Later, the Dogon arrived near Kani Bonzon in the 14th century and spread across the plateau, escarpment, and plains. You understand the appeal immediately. Height protects, stone hides, tunnels give advantage. Local oral history says the Dogon use natural tunnels known only to them to ambush and repel aggressors. Today, the dangers have changed. Since the 2012 war in Mali, terrorist groups and daily ethnic violence have made the region increasingly dangerous. Ancestral refuge under modern threat. In western Madagascar, people live near a stone forest sharp enough to keep the center empty. Tsingy de Bemaraha is not a normal settlement landscape. Its core is a maze of razor-edged limestone pinnacles, too jagged and difficult for ordinary living. So, human life gathers around the edges. Bekopaka sits near the Manambolo River, close to the Great Tsingy and Little Tsingy. It has roughly 9,000 residents. Antsalova serves as a broader regional hub with around 58,000. You do not build easily inside the Tsingy. You live beside it. The river basin supports water, fishing, and rice cultivation. The limestone labyrinth once served as a natural fortress, with caves and burial sites used for refuge, but the periphery is vulnerable. Poor infrastructure, unsafe water, limited health care, cyclones, drought, floods, malaria, banditry, and food insecurity press against daily life. A settlement line drawn around stone teeth. A temple hangs from a cliff in Shaanxi, 75 meters above the ground, suspended but not floating. The Hanging Temple, also called Zhuangkong Temple, is built into a cliff near Mount Heng in Hunyuan County. It dates back more than 1,500 years, with legendary construction beginning in 491 AD by the monk Liuran. It is not a home today, but it was built like survival engineering. You look at the wooden halls and expect stilts to do the work. They do not. Oak crossbeams fit into holes cut deep into the rock. The main support hides inside the bedrock. "27 wooden beams, iron chains, and reinforcements help hold the structure together. The complex blends Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism in one place. Weather, erosion, age, and gravity still test it. A temple held up by faith, timber, and stone. In western Georgia, a church sits on top of a limestone pillar, 40 meters up, barely enough space to breathe. Katskhi Pillar rises above the Katskura River Valley near Chiatura. Its summit covers around 150 square meters. About 1,600 square feet. On top are a restored church, a crypt, 3 hermit cells, a wine cellar, and a curtain wall. You imagine living there, and the world immediately shrinks. The summit church measures only about 4.5 by 3.5 meters. The site was venerated as the Pillar of Life and a symbol of the true cross. Archaeological studies date the hermitage to the 9th or 10th century. Religious life returned in 1995 with monk Maxim Kavtaradze. He lived on top for 20 years, coming down only twice a week. A life reduced to prayer, stone, and descent. In Wadi Kelt, a monastery hangs against the desert canyon. Rock above, rock below. Silence pressing from every side. The Monastery of St. George of Choziba stands in the Jericho Governorate of the West Bank. It is an active Greek Orthodox monastery inhabited by monks. The complex grew from a lavra established in the 420s and became a monastery around AD 500. You reach it by crossing a pedestrian bridge over Wadi Kelt. a canyon many connect with Psalm 23's Valley of the Shadow of Death. Early monks settled around a cave where they believed Elijah was fed by ravens. Hermits once lived in nearby cliff caves and gathered weekly for Mass and a communal meal. The monastery was destroyed by Persians in AD 614, when 14 monks were massacred. A house of prayer inside a valley of danger. In northern Italy, a hermitage hides inside a mountain gorge. Not on top, not beside the cliff, inside its wall. Eremo di San Colombano stands in Trambileno Rovereto. Built into the gorge formed by the stream of Leno Valarsa. Nobody lives there permanently today, but the site was shaped by solitary hermit life. Natural caves halfway up the gorge wall were used by hermits from at least 753, based on an inscription carved into the rock. You climb 102 steps cut directly into stone to reach it. The first settlement was called the Cave of the Hermits. A small church was later built beneath a natural rock roof, with documentary evidence dating to 1319. The current church was completed in 1720 and restored in 1996. A hidden sanctuary reached one carved step at a time. In the Swiss Alps, an inn presses itself into a cliff cave, wood against stone, windows over open air. Berggasthaus Aescher sits in the Alpstein Massif of Appenzell Innerrhoden. Below Ebenalp, at about 1,640 meters above sea level. It is not a full-time residence, but a mountain inn built into one of the wild Kirchley caves. The inn has existed since 1846. The current building was constructed in 1860 on the site of a rock shelter once used by hermit monks. You see the appeal: a roof, a wall, a meal, and a ledge in the mountains. But the setting controls everything: height, weather, steep paths, and falling rock. All remain part of the place. Social media fame brought congestion, especially during peak season. The building was renovated in 2019 and 2020, while keeping its outer form almost unchanged. An inn wedged between hospitality and exposure. In western Libya, shelter becomes older than memory. The Akakas Mountains, or Tadrat Akakus, rise in the Sahara Desert of Gat district. The The range lies east of Gat and stretches north from the Algerian border for about 100 kilometers. This is not a modern village in the usual sense. It is a landscape of prehistoric occupation, rock shelters, temporary human-built habitats, and archaeological sites. You are looking at survival across climate shifts. Hunter-gatherers occupied the mountains through the Holocene. Early groups lived near valleys and lowland lakes. Later groups became more settled during dry periods. Pastoral Neolithic communities relied on animals, mobility, foraging, and survival rather than farming. The rock art dates from 12,000 BCE to 100 CE, showing humans, horses, camels, elephants, giraffes, music, and dancing. But heritage here is fragile. Since 2009, at least 10 rock art sites have suffered deliberate destruction. A desert archive written on stone. At the top edge of the United States, a city sits on frozen ground. Utqiagvik, formerly Barrow, lies north of the Arctic Circle. It is the northernmost city in the United States and the largest city of Alaska's North Slope Borough. In 2020, 4,927 people lived there. The Inupiat have lived around this area for more than 1,500 years. Archaeological evidence reaches back to around 500 AD. Ancient sod house mounds still stand near the Arctic Ocean shore, but erosion threatens to take them. You cannot drive here from the rest of Alaska. No roads connect it. Freight comes by air year-round and by ocean barges during the summer sea lift. The city sits on tundra over permafrost that reaches up to 1,300 feet deep. The sun disappears for about 66 days each winter, a city living where the map runs out. In northeastern Nepal, a town climbs the side of a hill at 3,440 meters. Namche Bazaar sits in the Khumbu region in Solukhumbu district. It is nicknamed the Sherpa capital, and in 2001 it had 1,647 people living in 397 households. You feel the altitude before the town fully appears. This is the gateway to the high Himalaya. Trekkers stop here to acclimatize before climbing higher toward Everest routes. Local life depends heavily on lodges, stores, internet cafes, restaurants, bakeries, and visitor services. But Namche was not born as a tourist stop. It functions as the main trading center and hub for the Lanji region. A Saturday market still runs in the town center, alongside a daily Tibet market. The nearest open airport is at Lukla, 13 kilometers south, a mountain town built around breath, trade, and waiting. Deep in Uttarakhand's Toons Valley, a small village holds its place above the ordinary road map. Kalat sits in the Garhwal region, roughly 6,500 to 7,800 feet up. Near deodar and pine forests, terraced farms, and snow-clad peaks, only 20 to 25 households live there. You do not find hotels, markets, or easy entertainment. The village remains outside mass tourism, partly because access is hard. Reaching it requires getting to Sankri, then completing an 11-kilometer trek or a seasonal jeep journey. Winter snowfall can make access difficult. Monsoon months bring landslide risks. Mobile signal is minimal. Internet is mostly absent. Electricity is limited. Traditional Kathkuni houses of stone and timber are still used, some believed to be centuries old. Daily life turns around rajma, potatoes, millets, apples, livestock, wool, forest resources, and homestays. A village protected by inconvenience. Off Newfoundland's northeast coast, an island community keeps refusing to vanish. Fogo Island is the largest offshore island of Newfoundland and Labrador. It measures about 25 kilometers long and 14 kilometers wide, surrounded by cold North Atlantic water. In 2021, 2,117 residents lived there. You reach it by ferry or air. The MV Veteran links it to mainland Newfoundland, but weather still matters. In winter, snowfall averages more than 3.5 meters, more than 11 feet. Early settlers survived through seal, salmon, lumber, fur, and cod. Then the northern cod fishery closed in 1992, forcing a shift toward crab, lobster, tourism, and cultural industries. The island had already resisted government resettlement plans in the 1950s. Medical isolation remains serious. In 2022, the island's last physician was due to leave, making care dependent on a 6-hour ferry round trip, weather permitting. A community held together by weather, water, and refusal. Some of these places might be empty now, but others are still teeming with life. Monks still climb, villagers still farm, families still wait for ferries, storms, supplies, and seasons to turn. That is what makes them hard to forget. More than just the cliffs, caves, volcanoes, or frozen ground is the decision to remain where comfort disappears and survival becomes part of daily life. If one of these homes caught your attention, sound off in the comments. And if you want more places that look impossible but still exist, watch the next video, because the world is full of places that should have been abandoned, but weren't.